In this video, we're going to carry on with our tic-tac-toe, and I'm going to hopefully introduce the AI step one in this video. So before I do the AI, though, I just want to review where we were at last time. So where we were at last time, we looked at resetting the game. And so we came up and created functions for each of the things just to make it a little bit more readable and easier. And one of the things, for example, if I want to clear the text, what we did is we said button 1, button 2, text, button 3, text, and so on. A better way to do this, and I think it's time to start looking at this, is instead, I would like to write this in much fewer lines of code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list of buttons. And previously, we've learned how to do lists of strings or integers or floats. I'd like to do a list of buttons. So all I do is I created a list of buttons called button list. And I'm going to include in the list button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, button 5, button 6, button 7, button 8, and button number 9. Now, you might ask, why am I doing this? Well, I think it makes the code easier to read, and you'll see in a second. So what we can do is I can put a for loop here, and so I can say for button in my button list. So I'm going to go and loop through the button list. So temporarily, button is now going to be button 1 the first time the loop is executed. And then the second time the loop's executed, it's going to be button 2. And so instead of writing all those 9 lines, I can now replace it with button, and I can say the button text is equal to a string of a space, which would be what I want as the text of each of the buttons. So instead of doing all of this, button text equals a space, I can just do in one line, say button from the button in the button list. So it's going to be 1, then button 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, all the way, oops, you can see I made a mistake. I didn't put a 9 here, all the way to number 9. And so I can replace all of this with something like this, which is much cleaner code, because you can see I'm going to just create a loop, a for loop, that's going to loop through all the buttons, and each button is going to be set to just a blank space. We could do the exact same thing up in the changing the color. So again, to do it, I just make a list of buttons, and then I would just say button.config. The background equals white smoke. And one of the nice things about doing it this way is it's less lines of code. I just have my button list, and then I just loop through it. And it makes it easier to read. And if I do make a mistake, I'm less likely to need to fix each of the 9 or have one of the ones missing, because it's a loop. And so this is just a preferred way to do it. And so I'm going to get you to change all of the things in your program to doing a loop, a for loop, to cycling through all of the buttons where you need to do that. Okay, I'm not going to do that right now. You can certainly figure that out. As I said, we wanted to work on an AI. And so if I run my program, let's just see what we have here. So if I'm going to have an AI, how AI is going to work, we're going to start with a very simple one. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with it just randomly finding an empty space and placing an O in that space. So for example, if I place an X here, what the computer is going to do is if I have my mode set to AI, and so I'll make a variable here that's going to say AI. What it's going to do, it's going to say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 empty spaces, and randomly get a number from 1 to 8. And so if I click on an O, you'll see it chose the 1, 2, 3, 4th space here to place an O. So again, I'll place an X right here. The computer will count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 empty ones. And it will place an O in a random number from 1 to 6 this time. And so let's say a number from 1 to 6 is 3. So it'll count 1 empty space, 2 empty space, not empty, not empty, 3 empty space. And so if it was a 3, it would place an O here randomly. And then I might go and get a win. Okay, so what I need to do is somehow figure out that if I toggle AI on, I want the computer to count how many empty spaces there are and then generate a number from 1 to that number. So let's lots to do here in just getting that before I even get it to work. So let's take a look at what I did. In the AI menu, I said if I select Simple AI, I want it to go to a function called do nothing. Well, this time I'm going to create a function called Simple AI. Okay, so now I've got a function that it's going to go to called Simple AI, so I better create the function called Simple AI. So to make a function, I type in def and Simple AI. And now I'm ready to code for Simple AI. So what do I want to do here? Well, what I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to want to toggle a variable called AI mode and set it on. And then I might also define here that the level of AI is simple. But for now, I'll just toggle on a global AI and say that we're going to play AI mode. Later on, as I make different levels of AI, I'll look at doing that. So let's create a global variable called AI mode. And I'm going to set it equal to false by default. And then when I select Simple AI, I would toggle that global variable. So I'm going to call it AI mode. And then, so now I've accessed it in my function. And I can say the AI mode is now true. Great. So here we go. So AI mode is set to true. Now, to help me debug, one of the things I also like to do is just put a print statement, and I'm just going to say print AI mode has been set. And here we go. Let's run the program, and although we haven't made an AI, you're going to see, oops, forgot my parentheses, slopping coding. Let's go, and I'll run the program. And what you're going to see here is when I run the program, if I start playing, it's in regular mode. But if I said AI, Simple AI, it's going to say AI mode has been set. So I can write stuff to the screen to sort of help me out. In fact, even better, I might make this a formatted string, and I might put here the AI mode variable. And this also is good because this also helps me to debug. So just for debugging, I know that if I run it now and I run the module, when I select AI mode, it says AI mode has been set to true. So I know AI mode variable has been set to true. And so I'll do this from time to time. I'll put lots of prints just to give me some feedback. And then later on, I can go and delete them all when I have my final product. Okay, so if I've turned on AI mode, how is AI mode going to go in placing the mark? And so when we place a mark, this is when we're going to have to trigger AI if AI needs to go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to normally play X and O by depending on which mode we're on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to put in here that after I let player X go, or the first player go, what I'm going to do is I need to determine if the game's over. And if the game's not over and it's AI mode, instead of turning the button to O, I'm going to have AI play. So in here, I need to check if AI mode, then what I want to do is I'm going to put some code in here to play AI. So what I'll do is I'll make a function called AI, and we'll go to AI. So because I'm using this global variable AI, I better also add that to my list here as AI mode in my global declaration. So I know up here, when I place a mark, I'm going to be checking AI mode, and if AI mode is true, it's going to be AI. So right now, I better make a function for AI as well. So let's create another function called AI. And for now, I'm just going to print AI will play. So we can see if AI is going to play. So right now, when I first run the game and I place a mark, AI mode wouldn't be true. And so it's not going to do anything. And so you won't see it print AI. So let's just run the program and see in here. So you'll see, there we go. Nothing is going. It's just like it was. And it's playing tic-tac-toe like normal. Now, if I set AI mode, what should happen is when I press an X, it said AI mode has been set to true, and AI will play. Great. So now we're going to need to do some coding here. The other thing is, I don't want AI mode to play if if the game is over. And so what I need to do is I'm also going to need to know if the game is over. So I'm going to look at my global variable called game over, and the game over was in the check win. So in check win, we would determine the game over if someone had won the game. And so I don't want AI to play. So if it's AI mode, I want to play AI. And if it's not, game over. Because I don't want to play if it's game over. Great. So the game's going to stop when the game is over. Super. So what we're going to do is, the next thing I want to do is AI needs to determine how many empty spaces. And once we know how many empty spaces, then I can determine where I want to play. So that's lots to do. So let's, I think we've got everything working here for our button. So our button's going to place an X or O if it's in regular mode, and then it's going to see if someone won and the game's over. If no one's won and the game's over, what it's going to do is AI is going to play, and it's going to be AI's turn. And AI will place a mark and so forth. Okay, so let's get AI to start to play the game. So as I said, I'm not going to worry so much about the level of AI. We'll just presume if AI mode is set to true, we're going to play AI. And later on, we'll make medium and hard AI. But let's just start with AI. So AI will play. So now I want AI to play. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to get rid of AI will play because I know that it's coming here when it should. I want to have a list of the buttons. And so I'm just going to put the code that we had created already. A button list is the list of buttons from 1 to 9. For button and button list, and what I want to do is I want to count how many empty buttons. So let's, first thing I want to do is count how many empty buttons are there. And so for button and button list, I'm going to count each one. And so I'll create a variable called empty, number empty. And I'm going to set it to 0. And I'm going to cycle through the buttons in button list, and I'm going to say if button text, oh, and you can see I already made a mistake, so need to fix that. So if button 1's text is equal to a space, so there's a space in the button's text, that means the button is empty. So if that is true, what I want to do is I'm going to take the number empty and I'm going to add 1 to it. So it's 1 empty button. Great. And so I just want to know how many buttons there are. So once it finishes going through all these, after it's done all of the buttons, I'm going to print, and again, I'll do a formatted print. There are empty, number empty, empty buttons. Great. So I want to know how many empty buttons there are. So I'm just going to run this. And I'm going to turn AI on. AI mode has been set to true. You can see that's here. And if I place an X anywhere, there should be 8 empty buttons. Because right now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 9. And I'm going to place 1. So now there's 9 minus 1. There's 8 empty. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And AI says there's 8 empty buttons. Perfect. Why do I want to know if there's 8 empty buttons? Because the next thing I want to do is I want to get a random number from not 1 to 9, rather from 1 to 8. So that's the next step in AI, is to come up with a random number from 1 to 8. So to start with that, we previously imported random. And the reason we imported random is so we could get a random number. So I know how many empty buttons there are. So what I want to do is I want to get a random number. And so I can make a variable called AI plays in space, and that's going to equal random.random integer from 1 to the number empty. So if there's 8 empty spaces, I want to place O in one of those empty spaces. So I'm going to print again, and let's do a formatted print. And I'm going to say AI will play in the empty space number, and then my variable AI, I'll just copy it. It's kind of a long name for a variable, and AI plays in space. Great. So now I'm going to run the program and see if I made any mistakes. I'm going to turn AI on. So AI has been set to on. And if I place an X here, oh, it's randint. Sorry, sloppy mistake here. Not random int, it was Random. Sorry, need to fix that. Okay, so I'm going to place, turn AI on, and I place an X, and it says there's 8 empty buttons. Right. And then it says AI will place in empty space number 6. It generated a number from 1 to 8, and it's going to choose 6. So I want to place in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I want to place an O right here. And then it's going to say there's 7 empty buttons, which is true. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it says AI is going to play in empty space number 3. So it's going to, this is empty. Is this empty? No. Is this empty? Yeah. So that's empty space 1, empty space 2, empty space 3. So it would place, it would have been O's turn. So it's not O's turn yet. So now there's 6 empty spaces. And so it's going to say, again, a random number from 1 to 6. It chose 3. So is this empty? No. So this is empty 1, empty 2. Is this empty? No. And this is empty 3. And so it would put an O right here. Okay, so that's how it's going to work. So I'm pretty happy with how things are working here. So I could comment out the empty buttons and empty spaces, probably to make it a little bit more readable. So I know that that's working. And maybe I'll just comment it out for now. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to call place an O in space. So let me make a function called place and call it a capital O in space and some sort of number. So what this is going to do is this is going to place an O in the right space. And I know I'm going to want a function to place an O in the space. And so what I'm going to do here is I want to place it in space 6, in free space. Let's call it place in space. I'll just call it place in free space. That's a good name. So function place in free space. So what I'm going to do is I want to place in a free space, and the free space, I'm going to pass it this AI number. AI plays in space. And maybe I'm going to call it, I'll just call it space. Let's just change the variable. It's starting to get too long. So place in free space. And there you go. Maybe I didn't think a better variable name. I don't know. Let's call it AI's move. So AI's move. That's a better. So place in free space, AI's move. So right now it's random, but as you can imagine, later on this might come up with something even better. So what I'm going to do is I need to. Okay, what I need to do is cycle through my phone. It doesn't seem to understand that, which is kind of funny. Bixby it was. I have not set it off. So let's place in a free space. So I'm going to go through the buttons, and I'm going to come up with free space. It's going to start with 0. And I'm going to cycle through the buttons, and I'm basically going to use what I did when I cleared the text. So I'm going to say if the button's text is equal to 0. So as it cycles through the button list, it's going to look at button 1. And is button 1, is the text empty? Great. If it's empty, what I'm going to do oh, need to put a colon here, is I am going to say that free space is 1 bigger. So that's a free space. Great. Then the other thing I want to do is I want to say if the free space is equal to the AI's move, which we call number, and I could call this AI move here. That would be fine too. So if I said place something in the third free space, right now, button is going to look at button 1. Is it empty? Great. If it's empty, we've got 1 free space. Is 1 equal to AI's move of 3? No. So we're going to go back and look at button 2, and maybe button 2 is empty. Great. Is button 2 equal to 3? Nope. So we're going to go back in button and button list. So we're now at button 3. Button 3, maybe that's empty. Great. Free space is now 3. And if 3 space is equal to 3, yep, it is. Then what we're going to do is we're going to place our mark, or what do we call our move? Here's our moving place mark. Here was our place mark function. So we're going to place a mark in whatever button. So let's go back, and I'm going to put the place mark function right here, just so I can see it close in. So if our free space matched the move, we're going to place a mark, and what do I need to pass to the mark? I need to pass it a button. So I'm going to pass it a button, whatever button we were on in this list of going through the buttons. And so it's going to place a mark in the button. And so, again, it's going to think that, is it player X's turn? No, it should be player O's turn. So it should say, oh, actually, this is going to be trouble, isn't it? It's going to say, oh, yeah. So it's going to place an O in here, and player X turn will be true. And so anyhow, one of the other things we have to do here is we also have to say, when we do AI, that not only is it AI mode and not only is it game over, but it also has to be not player X's turn. Because only player O is AI. X is going to be a regular one. So if it's AI mode and it's not game over and it's not player X's turn, then AI will play. So over here, when AI plays, so X plays, it checks for win. Okay, the game's not over. Great. Player X, after they play, it's not player X's turn, so that will be not false, will be true, so that'll be true. It's not game over, that's true, and AI mode selected. Great. So it's going to go up here to AI. AI says pick a number between 1 and empty, and then it's going to say place in free space AI's move. AI's move is going to go through all the buttons, find where the match happens, and then it's going to place a mark in that button. So it's going to come here. It's going to place an O in that button, whatever button number we're on, and it's going to be player X's turn. So AI has now made its move. And so I think that's it. Let's play our game, and hopefully it all works. And so I'm going to turn AI mode on. So you'll see AI mode has been set. So now that it's set, X goes, O goes. Oh, yikes. It kept playing X and O's. So I need to fix one more thing. I'm going to stop the video because it's gotten awfully long. I'm going to fix one last thing, and then I'll make part 4.